Okay, so I gave you an example response to how I would write this myself, and it's a good little key to help you understand how you're supposed to make these responses, okay? So the first step is the analysis and interpretation component. Both in my Block B and my Block C class, many students, you just wrote one sentence and you made some key issues. So I'll read to you my response. In the source, we see a group of elderly people standing in a building labeled Salvation Army drop-off location. Beneath the store name, we see a sub-caption, give us anything you no longer have any use for. A desk clerk inside the building is answering a phone call saying, someone dropped off the entire Senate. Okay. So I want you to take a look. Every time I reference something that was in the source, some of the text that we see, what did I do to it? I put it into quotations. Okay, some of you missed that bit. And it may not lower your mark drastically, but it shows that you don't properly understand the mechanics of writing. Some of you skipped that entirely, and that shows that you're not properly analyzing the source or interpreting what is going on in the image. And that's a necessary step. You get marks for that when you submit your essays. Okay? That's why it's necessary. That's why it's there. Does anyone feel like I missed anything? Do you think I covered all of the important and necessary information in the source, in the image? Nobody's responding, but I'm assuming the answer is yes, everything was covered. Okay. And I didn't add in stuff that is not necessary. Okay, so I didn't talk about the bricks. I didn't talk about what they're wearing. Okay. And I did make a specific comment. It's not just a group of people. Remember grade 9s, it's a group of elderly people. They look a little bit older, right? And that's necessary information. The next step is looking at the author's perspective and the main issue. You always have to address what is the main issue in this image, in this source that's given to you. If you skip that step, again, it shows that you don't fully understand the source and you're not fully capable of responding to the issue, which lowers your mark. Okay, this is about critical thinking. You know, if you skip that step, it shows, hey, this student isn't capable of demonstrating that they know how to critically think about the subject. Okay, so my response to that was, the main issue presented in this cartoon is whether or not the Senate has any use. Okay, and how do we know that? Well, we go back to some of the writing in the source. Okay, let's not drop things there. Thank you. The author is attempting to criticize the function of the Senate, and given that all the people are old, the age of the senators. The source suggests that we as Canadians should get rid of the Senate because we have no use for them. And the reason why these sentences make sense is because I've already set up in my analysis portion the necessary evidence. I've identified the important dialogue, comments, symbols, images, whatever I need to. So I already mentioned that, well, somebody dropped off the entire Senate. It's for anything you no longer have any use for. I'm making that connection there, that the author of this source thinks that the Senate is useless. In that segment, I also have bias. Okay, you should always be looking and trying to detect if there's bias in the image, in the source, and whatever you're doing. Does this person lean heavily one way or the other? So if you flip over the page, you'll see me addressing the bias. What I wrote is, the author seems to be against the Senate. The cartoon depicts the negatives of the Senate, but not any of their potential positives. The source also provides no reasoning as to why the Senate is of no use. Okay, so it's not very clear if you look at this image why the author thinks that the Senate is useless. Is it? Does anyone see anything very obvious? Right? The only thing that we discussed when we were doing this was that, hey, they're kind of old. But that's not necessarily a strong argument for being useless, right? I mean, we all know some old people that are pretty useful. Hopefully myself. Although I'm not that old. Now, in this next portion, I'll slide this down. In the conclusion, I added in another segment that we'll slowly build towards. Okay, these two paragraphs here. By the way, grade 9s, I see a bunch of you aren't even looking at the sample document. We should be looking at that because many of us still struggle to write. Okay, so let's maybe flip that over and read that together. Okay, these two first paragraphs in the conclusion are referencing a case study, some sort of evidence. It's a demonstration of social studies knowledge. The reason you need that component is because, again, it shows your ability to critically think, and it also demonstrates that you know what you're talking about. Okay, is it important to know what you're talking about? Let's say you're trying to convince someone to do something. Is it important to understand the subject matter? What do we think? Yes, no, you can nod your head, shake your head. Right? Some of us are saying yes, most of us are staring blankly at nothing. You want to know what you're talking about. Okay, which means that you'll actually have to read your textbook at times, answer the questions, and reference that material. So in chapter 1, we already learned about the Senate. We learned about their role. So we want to be able to reference what we know about the Senate to support our own claim. Okay, and that will be next. So the Senate plays a crucial role in the development of legislation in Canada. They're part of the House of Commons. Although they are appointed by the Prime Minister, they are selected to represent Canada's regions. Although some of the criticisms may be true, such as the Senate doesn't necessarily reject laws, or the fact that they're chosen by the Prime Minister makes them more likely to support that particular political party, it doesn't remove the fact that they are there to represent their region of Canada. So here I've provided some support for the Senate. Hey, part of their function is that they represent all of the regions in Canada. They don't just represent the Prime Minister who appointed them. I've also addressed some of the criticisms that, one, the source brings up, or two, the source might intend to bring up. Right? So addressing the fact, or addressing the issue of why does this author think the source is, or the Senate is useless? Right? They should have a purpose, and you kids should be aware, because we learned this in their last chapter, of what they do and what their role is. And hopefully you're able to speak on that. Okay, and so anytime you're writing, it's good to address any of the criticisms of your argument, but also provide support. Okay, and so we'll read the next little segment. Some changes that could be made is to lower their age of service. If the regular Canadian is supposed to retire at 65, why should the Senate members work until they're 75? Additionally, would it not be better to have senators aged 35 to 60, as they still have many years to live and many may be more concerned with the well-being and decision-making process of Canada? So I'm providing some logical arguments for why age is an issue and how we can fix that. Right? I'm not just talking about the problem, I'm also providing a solution here as well. Right? I'm demonstrating my ability to think critically about the issue that the author has presented to us. Right? And again, what's the issue? Anyone? You can just share. Don't be shy. It's just a camera. One, you're not even going to watch it anyways. What's the issue in the source? I said it earlier. What is the...
Senate is useless.
Exactly, right? So we need to address that issue in our argument. Okay, if you just ignore that because you're a little scared of writing, what do you think is going to happen to your mark? It's going to go downhill. Right? You're not demonstrating critical thinking ability, and you're not actually addressing the problem. You're not answering the question. Okay, your grade 10, 11, 12 essays, there will always be a main question that you need to address. Okay? For grade 9s, it's almost always related to Canadian government, Canadian economics. Okay? So you need to address the source, you need to address the issue. Now, the next segment there is the actual conclusion. So in conclusion, the source is heavily biased against the Senate. Age is the only obvious issue the author of the source has with the Senate, which is demonstrated in the source. The source does not take into account the benefits of the Senate and who they represent. Additionally, the source makes the same error that they may be pointing out about the Senate. Rather than make an amendment to the function of the Senate, the author simply suggests we throw them out, pass or reject, just like one of the potential criticisms of the Senate. Okay, so now I'm countering this issue, this source, by acknowledging that, hey, you're saying the Senate is useless, but all you're suggesting is either one or the other. You're not putting a middle ground solution. You're not actually addressing, you're being biased against the Senate by saying that, well, they don't do anything for us, which potentially isn't true, right? Again, they're supposed to represent the regions of Canada and their needs, desires, and wants to the House of Commons, okay? So what you should be doing is taking a look at the way you responded. Maybe some of these key elements you missed. Which ones are they? Did you not properly reference the source? Did you not properly, then that includes the length of discussion on the topic as well. Did you not have enough content related to addressing the source? Did you not understand the main issue that the source is presenting? Maybe your issue was you were writing I statements, which you want to not get into the habit of, right? You want to be objective in a moment, okay? The highlighted segments, don't worry about that. In our future assignments, we'll deal with that, okay? And then your conclusion. Your conclusion is summarizing your ideas that you've written about and your understanding. Okay.